There we go. You can see me where I actually am in the new office at Run East. Brilliant Noises now, based in Brighton. Thank you. And you can see we've just moved in because there's the box there. This is why people put their things on blur. I'll put it on blur. That's more professional, isn't it? Thank you all for coming. What we're going to do today is be talking about teams and about how you can help your teams kind of get used to and participate in what is a revolution. For those of you who don't know Brilliant Noise, we are a digital transformation consultancy. We work typically with global brands. And I guess the first thing to say here is everybody comes to this conversation about generative AI with their own frame, with their own understanding of the world. And we're going to talk a bit about why it's really important to try and push that aside. But I guess I need to be honest as well about what my frame is, what our frame is in having written this briefing about AI and working with teams. We're all about tech revolutions, so we do get excited about them, but we have been through a few, so we've been disappointed. We know when the promise of social media turned out to be very, very exciting, but also to have some challenges and harmful side effects. We know a lot about brains, interestingly, because we've always been looking, right since one of our first projects was working with Microsoft on a book about how to design your day so that you can work with digital tools using the latest discoveries in neuroscience. And of course, we're going through a neuroscience revolution as well as an AI revolution at the moment. So I think that's really important. And we know about transformation. We know that it's hard. We know that it's full of a lot of emotions. We know that it's technically difficult, it's energetically difficult, it's organizationally difficult. So today we're just going to go through like 20, 25 minutes of us telling you what we know, what we've experienced. We're going to open up for questions. This call is scheduled for half an hour. I will stick around for a little bit at the end if there's anyone interested in chatting. And we will be sending out a follow-up with a summary of how to hold your own team day around this, as well as links to all of the articles we mentioned. So I'm going to just say that a year ago we told you so. We did a webinar about, we were asked to do a webinar by a business federation about the metaverse and Web3, and we said that it was a load of premature nonsense and that the thing to look at was artificial intelligence, especially generative artificial intelligence, because it was changing how we were thinking about creative processes and how we were thinking about work itself. When you know, you know. This is Jessica Chastain in one of my favorite films, Zero Dark 30. And she knew where the target's house was. She knew where Osama bin Laden was, but took a long time to persuade everyone. And this is one of my favorite scenes from the movie. Jessica goes to her boss's window once she's worked out where the fugitive is and keeps writing every day the number of days it is since they found the house, and nothing has been done. And it is 225 days since ChatGPT was published. There was generative AI before that, but that was the moment that it was put in the hands of the 5 billion odd people in the world who could access it for free and use this tool. 225 days later, and what have we done? Well, an incredible amount of things have been done. An incredible amount of work and evolution is happening around this space, but we're probably only just really getting to grips with it in terms of what it means for organizations. Because at that moment, it really was AI everywhere all at once. And we'll talk a little bit about how this is different to previous AIs as well. But in explaining it to your teams, you're probably going to find that most people have an opinion. Most people have used it or know someone who's used it. They may have had a good experience, they may be excited, or they may be completely turned off by the idea, completely against it. This is not just about AI, this conversation. What we're talking about here is what teams need and how we can best serve our teams and help them to engage with what we believe is a tech revolution. That is what we believe, and tech revolution almost doesn't do it justice. This is the beginning of something truly transformational for society and for all of us. But I won't go on about that. I guess you're interested already, and that's why you've come here. Teams need safety, they need direction, and they need connection. And what we mean by that is they need to know what their goals are. They need to know that their leader, that their organization knows what they want, where they're going. They need to know that they're safe to do their work, that they're always going to perform best when there is psychological safety, when the boundaries are clear, and when they're supported. So we need to be safe, to be comfortable, and to do our best work. We need to have a clear idea of direction, and we need connection with each other, with our leaders, with the rest of the organization. So these are the kind of, I think, 3 magic ingredients that teams need. So how do we think about them in terms of what our roles are as leaders, perhaps? Leaders in uncertain times, we're very clear on this and have been for some time, is that what leaders need to do in uncertain times is not pretend that they have the answers, not pretend that there is something definitive. And in this space, there really isn't. Even 225 days later, even the tech giants are scrambling to catch up. Even the most advanced firms don't fully understand what's going on. And yet we know that something is going on. So there's a huge amount of uncertainty around this technology and what it will mean for society and for our jobs. So we can give clarity on what we do know. We can be humble about the fact that we don't know everything. And most importantly, as we say, we lead with questions. It's much more useful to be telling people that our job is to find out what this can do for us. Our job is to find out what it means for us and our customers, than jumping to a conclusion or jumping to a solution that we should all be working on. And if you're, well, I think this is one of my favorite articulations of a policy towards generative AI, from a truly great leader, Rula Khalaf, who's the editor of the Financial Times, an organization which we admire deeply, which we worked with some years ago around a former digital revolution. And this is a leader talking to her team in public. So she published a letter about the Financial Times's policy on generative artificial intelligence. It went on the front page. If you didn't see it, you can look it up. But she said that generative AI is the most significant new technology since the advent of the internet. Wow. Yeah, internet, late 1960s, became very popular over time. The web supercharged it, but it's the most significant new technology since then. Rula Khalaf, Financial Times, they're not given to hyperbole. It is developing at breakneck speed, also accurate, absolutely. And its applications and implications are still emerging. So what she's saying here is, we know this is big, we don't know why, we don't know how. And actually, when I went back to this quote, I reread the rest of the article yesterday, and I realized that the whole of this presentation, really, Rula has nailed it. All newsroom experimentation will be recorded in an internal register, and that all journalists will be trained through a series of masterclasses on what they do know and what the best practices are. I mean, there you have it in a nutshell. This is what we need to do for our teams and our organizations. Brilliant Noise's test, learn, lead approach to experimentation, structured experimentation, speaks to this as well. It's experiments that are recorded, that are shared, and that there's training going on, that there's group learning going on. I don't want you to leave, but this is the whole nub of this presentation. This is, I couldn't say it better than this. Let's move on to scary things, because that grabs our attention. This is a creative, an artist, and advertising creative. I grabbed this from The Drum. I will send the link. I forget the name immediately. It might be Pate. An advert that they put up in Hoxton, which saying a not unfamiliar sentiment, that a creative using AI is like a turkey voting for Christmas. And that's a hilarious, grim metaphor for what's going on. The more that as creatives, or as anyone, we're using AI, we're of course improving it. Are we just improving the next equivalent of Google that will then extract value from all of our intellectual property? There are all of these fears around. It's not necessarily that helpful, though, for us. Fear is probably the least helpful emotion, and the one that we need to deal with fastest, because it narrows our options, it makes us defensive and not think expansively. I don't think it's helpful. And also, just to extend the metaphor from that advert, I have to point out, as an analyst, that there is no evidence that Turkey no votes and referenda have ever averted Christmas. It doesn't matter which way the turkey votes. The farmer isn't reading the results. Christmas will happen. So, you know, not taking part, not looking at it, not exploring it is it's denial. And which leads me on to thinking about some of the other reactions to the extreme new. You may recognize some of these in yourself and in your colleagues. And it's really, really important to not dismiss them and not to feel bad about them, but these are all natural emotions as we use the technology and as we read about it and as we understand just how huge the implications of generative AI are. We've talked about fear. There's a sense of disagreeing with it. I've come across this a lot at dinner parties. I just don't think it's the right thing. Well, again, like the turkeys, it doesn't matter whether you think it's the right thing or not. It is coming. It is here. Knee-jerk responses. This is an evidence of having a very strong frame that works well for you or for the person saying it on the world. And it's just statistics, or it's just a dumb search engine, or it's just a kind of magic trick. That's a kind of a knee-jerk response. That's like, I know what this is, when really you don't know what this is. We don't know what this is. Anger, it's an abomination. Bargaining, literally, I know this is hilarious, but of course, many of us might have done it, but people think that they should put please into their questions to ChatGPT, because maybe then, if we're polite to the AI, when it gains sentience, it'll treat us a little bit nicer. I mean, hilarious, but also very human, which is, you know, denial. It's just a load of nonsense. It's a load of hype. This is very understandable, given the outrageous claims that were being made about virtual reality and Web3 and crypto and NFTs about a year ago, including, I'm ashamed to say, by organizations like Accenture talking about, and McKinsey talking about just how huge this was and how important it was, and get in there now. And everyone's very quiet about it a year later. Anyway, maybe in the future. Sadness, frustration. What was the point of learning to draw? This was our creative director has been teaching on a course in the southwest of England at a university, teaching creatives, teaching graphic designers. And they had a session where everybody was training on AI, and some of these kids were just really annoyed because things like Midjourney, which can generate images, really good images. What was the point of me doing this whole course when there's now a computer that can do it for me? And that's a legitimate response as well. And then again, reductive. It's just statistics is my favorite one. It's just statistics, because actually that's how large language models, generative AI works. That it is just statistics, but it's just statistics in the way that your mind is just gristle and sparks of electricity and some hormones floating around inside a bone cave. You know, it's just is a trigger word. Just is the word to look out for in your own language and in the language of your team. It signals there's an emotional response there, rather than trying to think this through. We're trying to reduce it to something that's not quite as huge as it is, as it seems. And this is the kind of language from McKinsey has written a very helpful economic analysis of where generative AI will create value. They estimate 5 trillion in the next few years of economic value will be created. They did say that about Web3 as well, but let's be polite and say they're probably right this time. But this phrase was rather unfortunate introducing the report. It's a good long 20,000 word deep analysis. We'll take a first look at where business value could accrue. We love that. And the potential impacts on the workforce. Now, I don't know which you would prefer, whether you'd prefer to accrue value or be impacted, but they're predicting a 15% impact on marketing, by which they mean cost savings and mainly but jobs going. So there's that fear being validated by some statistics there. This is a little table I made. If you're in retail, CPG, life sciences, and banking, these are the top 3 areas that McKinsey say will be affected the most in the short term by generative AI, i.e. processes will be sped up, value will be created, people will be restructured, will lose jobs. And these are the roles, the departments that they see as being the most ripe for change. Customer operations, marketing and sales, software engineering, and R&D. I mean, I'd add consultancy to that list, but like them, I'm a consultant, so I don't want to say that. Anyway, marketing is right up there. They see things can be replaced really easily there. I have to say, sorry, just going back to that actually, that retail, CPG, life sciences, banking, I'm sure that those sectors are going to be disrupted, but the fact that they're the top 3 that are immediately going to be disrupted may or may not be related to the fact that they're the largest spenders on consultancy services in the world. So maybe it's a little bit of wishful thinking as well, because the 2 sectors that we've seen the most lessons coming out from and the most some of the most dramatic early impact, as well as in marketing, are education sector and the legal sector. Education sector has been having a revolution about because of generative AI, and we'll send round a Financial Times analysis on this as well. For 225 days. As soon as that came out, people were using it in the classroom. People were using it to design courses in the classroom. There was a very rapid process of moral panic and then calming down. They're adapting fast, but they're thinking about how they can change what needs to be taught and how to learn. And the legal sector as well, excellent review by The Economist. The legal sector has currently in the big firms a ratio of 7 to 1 associates to partners, and the latest analysis says that could be about 1 to 1. So that's 6 associates that aren't needed in that type of work anymore. And the fact that a lot of billing comes from a huge amount of time going into reading reams and reams of documents, which can now be sped up and accelerated by AI. That's just one of the ways that that profession is being impacted. And in the BN edition, which is our weekly newsletter, don't forget to sign up. If we were to take an early lesson from the legal sector, it would be redesign your work, or someone will come along and redesign it for you. I think that's what we need to be talking about with our teams. I should be honest with the impact on marketing as well. I expect it to be significant on marketing services. We've been using artificial intelligence in copywriting and in research and ideation and things like that for a long time now. And I say this because this is our work, but the where we've got to in developing strategy processes, which often involve crunching through lots and lots of documents, lots of qualitative data, interviews, talking to people, finding the insights from those, piecing those together. We think it can be done about, we think that we're saving about 90% of the time on that planning process. That is literally a day to do what used to take us 20 days to do. That's not 90%, but yeah, nobody ever went into PR because they were good at maths, and that's where I started. I'm going to just move through this. So chess is one of the other places, apart from legal and education, to look for impacts and look for how people adapted. As you probably all know, there was the point where Garry Kasparov was beaten by the computer Big Blue, and then he invented something called advanced chess or centaur chess, and that was an attempt to see what happens when a human and a computer play a human and computer. Chess shows us what happens when machines that help us think, that when AI take over a sector and disrupt it. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of excitement, there's a lot of emotions, and then there's play, and then there's experimentation, and then new things start to emerge. If you're interested in reading more about this, there is an amazing paper by Sebastian Kukowski, Johannes Luger, and Sebastian Reich called Artificial Intelligence and the Changing Sources of Competitive Advantage. What they basically do, this is a bit of a trick quote because this is from the abstract. Of course, I put it through AI to simplify it for us, because one of the things that AI is fantastic at is summarizing and making things simpler when it's got existing text. And basically, it says that what happens is that how people compete changes, the skills, the kind of cognitive abilities change, and even the game. I mean, it's literally a game changer. What happens is that we go through these phases of, we think it's about substitution, that a computer can play chess instead of a human. It ends up being about complementation and finding the best ways to compete by combining different types of computers, different types of data. And it also changes the game, even the games that are still played without AI. Those games have changed. Experts in the game say that people play differently now because they've trained with artificial intelligence. But also the audience watching the games watch them in a different way. We used to watch chess grandmasters play and just be amazed by their genius. Now the audience knows more than the chess players. They're watching and they're seeing the simulations, and they're playing it out on their own machines, and they're waiting to see whether the reigning champion has spotted a certain danger to them yet, because they know it's there because the computer's telling them it's there. Literally a game changer. This, coming back to technology and where we are with this now, Sundar Pichai, CEO of Google, says that he sees it as an extraordinary platform shift, touch everything, every industry, every aspect of our lives. It's like the PC shift, the internet shift, the social media shift, the mobile shift. But then he goes further, but I think it's deeper than that. That's insane. All of those tech revolutions that we've lived through in our lives, and the CEO of Google thinks it's bigger than that. And while Google is a big investor in artificial intelligence is actually a threat to their current business model. They make a mint out of paid search ads in search engines. Artificial intelligence and the different platforms that are around are a massive, massive threat to that income stream. But he thinks it's bigger than that. So that shift, that platform shift, just got real. I'm going to just give you a brief history. I call it a thief history because I nicked this from Stanford D School, who are amazing on this subject. Stanford's design school, so where they teach design thinking, one of the best institutions in the world for that. Why AI is different is that we're in a kind of a third phase, and this is very simplified, but it's a useful context to have. Is in the sort of 60s, 70s, artificial intelligence, the effort to create thinking machines was all about logic, was about creating if this then that type of machines and software, and that got us away, but it didn't really turn into anything amazing. I guess the last 15, 20 years have been about big data, and it's been about machine learning, where machines have been able to look at huge sets of data and start to predict things. And this is, of course, the age of the quants, when people who understood data, who could understand data science, could find huge value for organizations in using that. But generative AI, they say, is different to all of that because it's creative, because it invents things, and this is the weirdest thing of all, I haven't got time to go into all of it today, things emerge from it. It does surprising things. It's not predictable. This is where the hallucinations, the weird things that happen, come up. And this encourages us into thinking about, well, what are the strengths of brains? What are the strengths of artificial intelligence? What processes can we use between the two to connect them up to be smarter, to work better? And that's the kind of place where you can start going with your team in inventing and discovering new things to do. So who was Thuth? If I was more adept at this, I'd run a poll, but I'm not going to. Thuth was not the Greek god of lisps. It was an Egyptian god who invented writing, but also thought that it decayed memory. And I think it's a useful metaphor for how We look at the people who've invented AI and the people who are technologically adept at it may not actually understand the invention, may not actually understand its full potential. That just because you create something doesn't mean that you know how it's going to play out. And I think that creative minds and analytical minds and minds like yours, minds like ours, may have a much, much bigger role to play in this than they did in the quant phase of AI. So I'm going to share quickly just an idea of how we work with this and our team day, how we go about getting ourselves into this, how we make it safe, explain things. What we did on our first team day around this, and we're adapting this all of the time, was we start with what we call the AIBC, which is basically everything we know about the basics of AI. So we skip through the history, different ways, what its strengths are, how to experiment with it. One of the things that we take, again, from Stanford D School, was very inspirational in this, is to stop using wrong frames on it, to not think of it as a search engine, but think of it as an options engine. It's really, really good at creating options, alternative versions of things, and that's extremely useful. We talk through some useful tools. I'll send all of these out in the notes as well. But we talk through some useful tools that are mostly free, that we can use to run some experiments. And we make sure that we put some safety advice in there as well. We don't use confidential data, don't use people's names and things like that. You're putting them in the public domain when you use them in open AI systems. Don't believe what they say. Oh my goodness, as a human, it's so easy to be fooled, especially when they come back really quickly with answers. You've got to check anything that comes up that are facts. Don't be fooled into thinking it's a person. It's not, it's a system. And you don't have to take the first answer that it gives. That's one of the beauties of it. You can regenerate answers, see what other alternatives are available. And really the most important, not safety advice, but guidance, is get better at your questions. The better the questions, the better the outputs. And in terms of policy, we're really concerned that organizations at the moment are kind of, rightfully so, we talked about emotions, being nervous, knee-jerking into shutting down use of artificial intelligence by employees. What we think you need is to follow a kind of a three-step process with this, which is you start off by playing, you then step into experiments, and then you, as those things work and you find out what works through experiments, you can harden those into systems and process, and you can have a clear policy. Getting people moving and getting people trying stuff out, it's about personal productivity. Quite often, start with the small things. We don't need, this will invent business models, and you can start thinking about those big things, about how it's going to change big things. But you can start with personal productivity. You can start with move on perhaps to new ways of working, new systems. This is one of my favorite examples. A friend of mine who works for a non-profit said that they were trying to learn how to play with AI, and someone took meeting notes and turned them into a song by Dolly Parton and sent it around. And someone else then put that through another AI system that creates voices and sent it back round to everybody as Harry Styles singing it. That's a beautiful example of being playful. I really like that. Then things like planning a review meeting, planning a process. This is something I did with a colleague on our day. We basically gave everyone a task that they wanted to rethink or redo using artificial intelligence, and everyone brought something along. And this was a planning for a really big client review meeting. And what we did with that was we talked about what happened in that big review meeting, and we talked about how we might design a process with AI in it that would work better. And so what had happened in the first instance is we'd taken quite a long time to prepare the agenda, and as a result, we started to have a lot of conversations with the client about what was going to be in the meeting, because they wanted some certainty, and it was all a bit loose, a bit woolly. When we looked at it if we were trying to design it as an AI powered process, we realized that what we would do is set a goal, work out the process, and then work out where the AI fits in. And we came back after a 20-minute exercise with a really detailed agenda which we generated with AI, just by talking about the things that we wanted to put into the meeting, that we could use AI in the prep, we could use it in the hosting of the things, but basically we would speed up a lot of the boring stuff and get to the really valuable conversations with the client faster. I think it's also saying one of the things that we're doing is we're building kind of little prototypes of bots that can use existing learning materials and convert those into kind of being a live coach for people. There's an awful lot of brilliant knowledge locked up in PDFs on intranets that can be brought out just with very simple processes. And one of the things we've noticed through all of this and through our team days is that we ended up talking a lot about breaking frames, about just trying to examine the way that we're working, understand the process that we're doing, sometimes instinctively, and breaking it down a bit and looking at how it could be sped up, how it could be better. And it's especially valuable in creative work. This is a physics professor from Bristol University, wonderful on this subject, but he articulates something that is obviously very clear to people who do design thinking, but the best way to have a good idea is to have lots of ideas. Doesn't matter about the quality, it's having lots and lots of ideas and then looking for the connections and pulling them together. And that's something that can be sped up hugely by AI. Moving past that playful phase, it's moving into experiments. And this is something that we've done now for years, which is designing experiment programs to help people learn and find new ways of working with technology to make marketing better and make better marketing. So I do apologize, I've run slightly over time. I'm going to come to a quick conclusion, but we are going to be running more of these soon. So if anything here has whetted your appetite to learn a bit more about the way that we're working with this at Brilliant Noise, do let me know either in the comments or by emailing us at hello@brilliantnoise.com, and we'll be rolling out details of the next summer sessions of this webinar soon. Just to summarize though, it's about clarity and questions. It's about being really clear with what we do know and the best ways to ask questions with our teams. I think it's about encouraging and finding safe ways to play, and then structuring that more into experiments and testing out ways of working, and then hardening those things into processes. But casting our mind back to Jessica Chastain drawing on that window earlier on, you can act now. You don't need to wait for the case studies. You don't need to wait for the answers. You don't need to believe the people who say that they know what this is and have a solution that will solve it all for you. The way to help your team and help yourself and your business and society is to engage with this stuff and start to shape it and learn how it works. It truly is amazing, and is very, very rewarding. And I'm going to draw things to a close there and ask if perhaps anybody has any questions. I know we're over time, but we'll hang around for a few minutes more if anybody would like to ask anything. Just pop it in the chat Q&A. And I'm here with my human co-pilot, Stephanie Hubbard, who's gonna let me know what those questions might be. Okay, well, I think what we're going to do is wrap up now, because it looks like we are over time and people need to go. Please let us know what you think. Please get in touch if you'd like to discuss the work at all. It's been a pleasure talking to you all. Thank you very much. Oh, Henry's raised a hand. Oh, we do have questions. Oh, sorry. What I've done is I've very stupidly taken control of the technology and not invited my colleagues in. As you can see, I probably need an AI to sort this process out. Phil Nielsen asks, I would love to hear your opinion on the groups on Mo Gadat's position on AI, and more broadly the open letter calling for a pause to AI progress and research. Oh, that's a good one. Yes, so there are a number of people calling for a pause on AI research. They're worried about the implications of it. My opinion on that is that it's very unlikely that it will happen, and that the responsible thing to do is to engage and start to shape the technology ourselves. That's not down to any one of us, but I also tend to take the view that it's probably not as the technology isn't the scary thing, it's how people are going to use it. And I think that people who are looking at international regulations on what happens as AI evolves in the future, as it evolves towards some kind of superintelligence or artificial general intelligence, that's really, really important. For now, with generative AI, it's out there. The genie is out of the bottle, as you might say. You couldn't stop research globally on this. I mean, especially like one of the things that's really interesting is that open source AI models and things that people are already sharing are advancing as fast or faster than those by the big companies. So even if they did sign up, and they won't, to a moratorium, the technology would continue to evolve. Chloe Bullock, where can we go to start to use AI for sustainability? I have no clue, but I hope it can help us. So Chloe, I'd say that I think, and this is something to get into perhaps in a future session as well, but I think AI can help us think faster, think bigger, and accelerate the kind of cognitive work that we need to do to solve any problem, and that would include sustainability. I think it would have a role there. I think learning the skills of how you can use it to summarize, how you can use it to synthesize, how you can use it to ideate, and things like that could well have a role in sustainability as well. There are questions, of course, about the sustainability of AI, as there is with all technology and internet as well. But I think that something that can accelerate how we think could have a positive impact on how we tackle those questions. And thank you, Helen Kennedy. Jamie Huskisson, how do you mix the ChatGPT bias of being very popular versus the seemingly hundreds of tools popping up all over the place every day, week, and month? Great question, Jamie. And so ChatGPT is very popular. I think one of the things to do is carve out some space for some people, hopefully, or even yourself, to experiment with those. We definitely find that we have that different AIs have different strengths, and the ones that people are building for themselves in-house as well are really useful for specific purposes. We like to use a portfolio of different artificial intelligence systems. Claude, for instance, the Anthropic AI, is amazing at writing, but is one of the biggest liars I have ever met on the internet. It's so good at hallucinating answers that if you use it to kind of do research, you have to be ultra careful, but it's great at writing. I love Perplexity as a search engine. It kind of creates little articles based around whatever question you have, and puts some references in there as well to where it's got the source material from, so it's easier to trust. Another one, as we'll put on the list as well, is Consensus, which means you can have conversations with academic papers, essentially. Yeah. How do you get over decision paralysis with so many tools? What a great question. What a great question. Right. We're going to have another session, guys, because there's a lot more to say. One of the really interesting things about decision paralysis, which I often suffer from, is that there are tools, AI tools, that have been built by people who have different cognitive makeup to the norm or the average, what we call new people who are neurodiverse, which I kind of think we're all a bit neurodiverse, but like the people on the extremes, there's one called Goblin Tools, which is insanely good. And you can put in when you're feeling a bit stuck or a bit not sure what to do, you can put in questions into it, and it breaks down tasks into very simple steps, including decision making. So how do we get over decision paralysis? Well, break it down into a process, and sometimes there are AI tools that can be really helpful for that. But yeah, one of the other things, of course, around decision paralysis is there's so much there. You cannot keep up with all of it. You have to make peace with that, and just have your own portfolio of tools that you're using and are most useful to you at that time, and keep an open mind for other stuff. Otherwise, you can go down rabbit holes very, very quickly. It's one of the reasons that having a personal process for doing a task is really important, and also why it's important to know when you're in play mode, that's okay to be mucking around with different tools. When you're in experiment mode, you need to be a little bit more disciplined and know which ones you're using and why. And by the time it gets to process, it should be really straightforward as to which tools you're using, and that's been agreed or described to you. Katie asks what the most interesting experiment we did was. That's a really hard question, because every day we are shocked and surprised by the things that we can do that's possible with this. I'll talk from a personal point of view. The moment, and I wrote a blog post about this, which I'll connect to this. The moment that I was most excited about this was when I was having a conversation with my wife about garden design. She's a garden designer, and she was talking to me about a Dutch garden designer who designs very organic systems of gardens that where the plants renew. And she said his designs of gardens don't look like normal garden designs. They look like weird systems diagrams of mitochondria and things like that. I was thinking, that's so interesting. And so I was using ChatGPT and said, what could you explain? Is what he doing? Is what Peter Dolph called? Is Peter Dolph working with systems thinking? Have people looked at that topic? And it said no one has. But you're right. There are parallels between the two, and it listed out the key tenets of systems thinking with the key design principles of Pieter Dolph. I thought, that's fascinating. What would Pieter Dolph do if he was designing an organization, which is a challenge that we come across quite often? And it gave an answer. He would think about these things. He would think about seasonality. He would think about renewal. He'd think about decay, all of these kind of things. And then I got it to, as an experiment, generate the prompts to put into an image generator AI for what those org charts would look like that this garden designer would approve. And it blew my mind. It was, so the reason that was the most exciting experiment was because there was a rush, and this took place over about 20 minutes, where what would have been a note to myself or an idea to throw into the ideas bucket became a thesis and a possibility and a creative treatment that would have taken me and a team a day or so to work through. So that was the most interesting experiment, but there are so many. And thank you all. I think that's all we've got time for. Oh, thank you, Belinda. Thank you everyone for your comments. I'm really grateful for those. Yeah, Belinda's notes, a lot of heads in the sand right now. Yes, it's fascinating. It's absolutely incredible. I've seen it sometimes on Twitter or on Threads, the new Twitter alternative. I see people talking about, what are you guys doing about AI at the moment? What are people doing? And there's a long string of people talking about it. And you get people who are like, I'm experimenting with this. I'm finding it really interesting here. But I'm really shocked by the number of people who are technologists or creatives or in any field who are saying, it's a load of rubbish. It's just not. And I'm just thinking they must have the wrong frame, or they must have a mental block, or something emotional is stopping them from exploring here, because this is like a, well, the metaphor we used at our team day most recently was, it's like an electric bike for the mind. You can go up a hill without any effort. You're still cycling, but you can go much further, much faster. It's what I was trying to get across with that description of the garden design experiment is it's exhilarating. There's so much possibility here. Anyway, I think that's the end of the session. I've gone way over time. Thank you so much for coming and for your questions and comments. We'll be sending out notes and links, and also we'll be planning out our next sessions on this topic. Thank you very much for coming. Bye, everyone.